Because the following year, when again, listen, remember what I said 5 minutes ago, fans? Then when you were in Dignitas, but it was the MSL one, and they'd become TSM by now. When you came into this team, which, funnily enough, I never think people actually give those teams credit enough, because that wasn't even like big names. Like, remember, like Pimp hadn't been doing much. Obviously, MSL's just become an in-game leader. Like, the other players in the team, like people like Kirby haven't made it yet. Tensky's around. Like, this was like, the names don't look that great, but the team was actually pretty good. Like, competitively, I always said you were right there. Me and Pimp have had a million beers crying about this, mate, at the end of this lost at G. We all know the fucking stories. We've all told them all. But in this team, right, this was when you really started breaking out. Like, you weren't just good. I mean, if people want to go and look this up, right, there's an event, right, where, because back in the majors, sadly, you could lose 2 best of ones and you could be out. Yep. You guys went to a major, it was DreamHack Cluj, and mate, go, if anyone wants to go look this up, like the stat, I think you averaged like 1 kill per round over the 2 maps, aizy, and you have this one round, which I'm not joking, I would put like, this should be in the category for like best LAN ace ever. It's the one you do against Virtus Pro and Inferno, where you start with a deagle, and you just basically, I think you shoot 3 of them like 1 bullets. This is Virtus Pro at the Pauls, and it's like, it's one of the craziest aces I've ever seen, right? This was the period where obviously that play is what got the attention of the G2, which became fit. You know, it's kind of basically what built your narrative, and to me, it's actually key to the storyline, because if a modern day fan wonders why do they keep flaming aizy, like what's he done wrong, like it's because people thought this meant you were going to be a device, you know, you were going to be some superstar player. What do you remember of this period? Like, did you have a sense that you were in your prime? How did you think you played in the team? What was the way that they used aizy in that squad?
I think it's weird because back after Dignitas with the Astralis core, you know, you get kicked from the team, and that's obviously a big hit to the confidence, and etc. And then Copenhagen Wolves, which was the next Dignitas team with MSL and all those guys, contacted me, and we just started to play, and we had like our first tournament in something called Gaming DK finals in the other side of the country. And like, I just remember being a crazy event for me, where I just like freaked out totally, and it just like reset my confidence, and I thought I was like, I'm almost back to the player I thought I was going to be. So, and since then it's just like I just continued to have my like crazy games every round, and but I also think that I got a lot of help, at least from my positions and how the game was played back then during the meta, because I was running around with MSL, and it's like I was the second guy in, and that was a really good situation to be in every round. So, but I do think it requires a lot to like have the consistency of like keep fragging every round, like for players like Savu are simple, right? So, but yeah, it was a crazy year. I think it was like around 1 year before I switched to G2.
Let's talk about what you just referenced there, because as you've mentioned, it's something I've tried to make quite famous throughout my content so that people understand. One thing I always try to do is I try to figure out myself, like by talking to players, watching the demo, reverse engineer the idea of like, what's the setup in this team? Like, who's doing what? Who's being given resources? Who's working with no resources? Who's given the resources? And one thing I've always pointed out was, I thought that like actually MSL really hit onto a very smart way to play the game at that point in time, where, as you say, basically he did it with 3 different players in a row. He did it with you, then you left, then you got Kirby and did the same thing, then after that conflict. So it's like, listen, these are all talented players, but it shows that the approach works, right? And as you say, basically MSL realised, right, first of all, if you're MSL, you're not that great a fragger. I know now he thinks he's a fucking AWPer, but listen, we can all laugh about that in a few years or so, right? I know obviously he knows his skills aren't that great, but he's a good in-game leader, right? So his logic is, if I can be like the bait, or I can scout an area, or I can go first to draw fire, my guy who's like the entry with the fucking good aim, he's just going to clean up. Like, we're just going to get in the site. Like, I can see for an in-game leader, that's such a smart way to play the game. The downside, obviously, is a fan's still going to look at your stats and go like, these are terrible, or you're garbage or something. But that role, like, I don't know necessarily whether it's like as obvious now because people figured it out a little bit, but there's a lot of years that approach worked. Like, can you talk to that a little bit? Was it as like that strict as that? Like, they actually decide like, this is really how we're going to play, and we're going to do things like this, and I'm going to bait for you. Was it like ever formalized?
No, I don't think it was ever formalized. It wasn't never like it wasn't like we talked about a play style that we say like MSL goes first, I go second at all. It was just like, I think the play style just got built up to that way in a very like natural way, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, we also had like set tactics where I went in as the first guy as well. So I just think like the way we took map control was just MSL going first, and I was like behind him, and he's always been like this fearless guy, and I think that just like made me, Kirby, and Config look really good back then, and obviously taught us a lot. And yeah, if you see right now, I think that the way we played back then as terrorists probably like had an influence on the way we are as players today as well. So yeah.
Obviously, like I said, the weird thing about MSL, funnily enough, Carrigan did the same thing. It's they're people who they kind of weren't meant to be the in-game leader. They just decided one day, I don't know how, they just woke up one day and like, I'm just going to be an in-game leader for the rest of my career, and just did it. And the cool thing is they didn't, switch for like 6 months and switch back. They kind of committed to like, I'm just doing this only. Now, one of the things is, because the period when you had him this is very, very early on. Like before that, he was like the support player in Western Wolves. And again, because he was the supportive element, like, no one wanted him in the top teams, unfortunately. There's a lot of skilled players in Denmark, right? How would you describe, since you were with him his whole career, what was the early MSL like? What kind of approach did he take? Like, were there any like strengths and weaknesses that are obvious?
As an in-game leader?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough question. I just remember like in the beginning when we joined, after Dignitas, I joined Copenhagen Wolves with Glaive and MSL, and it was supposed to be Glaive calling, but then something happened, I can't remember what, and Glaive was out, and then we like, MSL wanted to try to in-game lead, and we just said, yeah, let's go for it. And back then, I just think he took a lot from what he's been using with like his source days with Glaive and Hunden, who he played a lot with, and in Western Wolves. So I think it was just like, it wasn't like a crazy play style and so much like on the fly calls, if you know what I mean. It was just like, it was very like structured, and everyone knew what they were supposed to do in every situation. So that's at least the way he wanted to build up like his play style. So everyone also had like, they know how to react whenever something happens. Yeah.
Since you got to play with him so many other years in your careers, that you were both together in North for so long, like how has he been like in the latter days, in the later years of CS? Like, was there a change? Was he some of the similar tendencies? How was he as an in-game leader later?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly like how big of a difference. I don't think there's much of a difference in the way he likes to play. I think that's pretty much like the same like base from like when he started to, with a very structured, like everyone knows what to do in every situation and always have like these like answers to whenever there's something happening. I just think he got a lot smarter over the years and knew how to read the game like quicker, and also maybe had some on the fly calls added to his play style. But I think like overall, I think he was like the same in-game leader back then as he is now, just improved.